So diving into building things in Fusion can be very confusing because there is a bit of a learning curve when you're just getting started. So I'm gonna try to give you an overview of how to get stuff into Fusion, where the nodes are, how the nodes connect, and then how to get whatever your finished product is back into the edit page so then you can continue to edit and render out your project. So without further ado, let's jump in. Explore a wide selection of pre-made creative tools for DaVinci Resolve, like titles, transitions, slideshows and infographics, like bar charts and callouts, and much, much more. Link in the description for more information. So we'll start off with getting stuff into Fusion. Getting stuff into Fusion is, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One, within Fusion, you can drag elements in. I did a video where I had some palm tree leaves and I drug them into the project. I'll show you how to do that here in a second, but let me show you from the edit page because there are a couple of different things that you might want to do here when you're continuing to build out your project. The first one is actually having something on your edit page. So I'm gonna grab a piece of content here. And now this would be the main way that you would, if you had to composite something on. So let's say you have an action film, someone's running around with a gun, they're shooting the gun, you have to put on some muzzle flashes. You're gonna wanna composite that onto the video. So we're going to actually have our clip on the timeline here, and we would go right into Fusion, and then we would start to apply all of our effects here. And the reason why we would do that is because as we got further into the edit process, we are then going to add on a color grade. If we're applying something in Fusion onto the node or onto the element that is on the timeline, then we'll have the ability to color grade that once we get to the color page because it'll be a part of the clip. So let me quickly show you that here. If I was just to take this, I'll explain all of this here in a second, but I just want to show you here quickly. So I have this element. Now when I go over into the color page and I go to add a color, it's going to color the element that we had in Fusion. Now this is very good if we're compositing something into our video, because then when it's time to color, everything will get that color grade applied to it. But let's say we're trying to do a title where we want to color the video, but we don't want to color the text itself. So we're not going to want to do it that way. If we were going to add some type of element into our project that we didn't want to have a part of the video clip, we could make a Fusion comp. And to do that, we're just going to right click, new Fusion comp. We can set some settings here. These are just going to be the default settings for when you initially drag it onto your timeline. It's going to be up here in your media pool. You can then drag it down and we'll have it here. When we add anything into this, they're going to be separate elements to color grade. So we won't have what we just did there. So for now, I'm just going to get rid, or actually, while we have both of these here, let me show you how this works. So if I go over into Fusion, you might think, oh, where your playhead is, you're just specifically jumping into that one video clip. Now that is true. It depends on which one's stacked and which one's visible, because whichever one is the top and it's most visible is the one you're going to jump into by default. But let's say you wanted to go into one of the other elements on your timeline. You're going to come up to clips up here, and then you're going to see all the elements that are on your timeline so you can add stuff to those. So now let's go around the layout of the user interface here. So just like all of the other pages, we have elements across the top here that we can turn on or off. Media pool, pretty self-explanatory. You bring elements into here. You can then drag these elements into your Fusion comp. So you don't have to only work with elements that are on the edit page. You can drag them into here. We have our effects library. This is going to be all the effects that are in Resolve, and then also all of the tools that are for Fusion are going to be found here. Clips, just talked about that. There is nodes. Not really sure why you would turn that off unless you needed some more screen to manipulate things, I guess. Over here, we have spline. This is going to enable you to change how your easing is on different keyframes. We have the keyframes that's going to show all of our nodes, where our nodes turn on, where they come on, where the keyframes are in those nodes. It's more of a layered system, so you can see all of the nodes and when they're on and when they're off, and you can adjust them accordingly. They both kind of do the same thing, just a little bit differently. Metadata, that's just show information about whatever the elements are that you bring in, and then the inspector. That's how we're going to change all of the parameters for each tool. So jumping right into the tools, there are different groups of tools, I guess is the best way to put this. All video is going to be 2D, but you can build 3D environments and then turn that into a 2D shot, right? So if I was to grab this is going to be obviously a 2D element, right? And all of our tools pretty much work with 2D elements. The vast majority of tools work with 2D elements. But then there's different sets of nodes too. So here we have, if I drag these down here, we have P emitter and P renderer. Those are going to be all of the stuff in the particle system. Only the particle system can connect to the renderer. Coming out of the renderer is a 2D image that we can then use with all of our other tools. So if I right click here, and I look at particles, there's a ton of different particle tools. Those tools only affect the particle system. They only do something for the particle system, and you can only connect them to each other. So anything that has a small p is for the particle system. And then we have 3D stuff. So I'm just going to grab this stuff here. Here's just an image plane. We have a camera. I can also bring a shape into all of this. And all of these elements work together. They go into a 3D renderer. The new thing for DaVinci Resolve 17 is we have shapes. These are all vectored elements. So if I right click, I come into here, I have, where am I here? Shapes. So I have all of these S nodes. Those are all shapes. And then they also have a renderer as well, the S renderer. That will then spit out a 2D image, which then we can manipulate with all of the other image nodes, all the 2D image nodes. So how do I get to all of the nodes? Well, one, we just seen, we right click, we go into tools. Here are all of our nodes. They're broken up into different categories. We have some here that are kind of like, I don't know, generically used. Some people use those, depending on what you're doing. You might use a couple of these, but it's all the same set of nodes. So it's not like one source has more nodes than the other. And then we also, in the effects library, if we come into tools, it's the same set of categories here as well. So right click, we see them there, we see them here, and we have them here. Once you get a little more comfortable with Fusion and you know the nodes names, you can just type them in by holding down Shift and hitting spacebar. Brings up the select tool, so I can do like, I can type in transform and get my transform node right away. That's going to be the fastest way to do it, but you do have to know the nodes. That is pretty much the groups of nodes. And then we have different inputs for nodes. So while we're doing this, we're just going to be creating something I can show you along the way. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab a text node. Now the text node, I have videos about the text node and how that works, but this is going to be where you're primarily going to be making all of your text. As you can see, I can't see this node right now, so we need to take it and put it into one of the viewers. And the easiest way to do this is dragging, holding down, like clicking, holding it down, bringing it up to any of the two windows here, and then releasing, and then we'll view it there. The other way you can do is you can click these little buttons here, but that's a pain in the butt. I wouldn't suggest doing that. I just always drag up to either one of the windows, or you can hit 1 or 2. 1, 2. You can do that on your keyboard. So that's how we bring stuff in. If we take a look at this particular node here, we have a blue triangle and we have a gray square. Gray squares typically are all of your output connectors, and then blue triangles are going to be your masks. So that's where you're going to connect your masks to. So with that being said, let's connect a mask here. So this is a rectangle mask. Here are a couple of the masks. I'm just going to connect that up. That's going to go right into there. And this is going to mask out if we're looking. So currently we're looking at this node. See, that's where we're viewing it, but we have this node selected. When we have one of these nodes selected, we see its control. And so we can move this around and we can see how that's being manipulated. If we were to just view this, we're just going to see gray, or excuse me, black and white, right? But here we can see it over here, how it's manipulating it. So what I'm going to do is we have some settings here that are being changed because we're moving around the little widget here. I'm just going to double click, and that sets anything to default. So whatever I change, if I double click, it'll set it back to default. That's also what this little dot here, that's wherever the default setting is. We have our X. If we click in there and then hold, we can drag left and right to change the parameters up and down. And same in here, if we hold left and right, we can change the parameters in. So what I'm gonna do is in the Y, I'm going to, so this is, I guess I should explain how these work. The bottom corner down here is 0. The top corner up here is 1, right? So these are getting up into the 1, right? So how it works is we go 0 to 1, right, on the Y, and then 0 to 1 on the X going across, okay? 0.5, 0.5, we're right in the middle. What I'm actually gonna do is bring this down in the middle of this if we have it at 0.5. So what I'm going to do is have it at 0.25, which is going to be the middle of our screen. I'm going to click right here and go to fit so we just see the whole video window. And I'm going to take my width and go as far wide as I can. So it's going to go full wide, but we're going to cut off half of it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get that secondary title, and I'm going to put in here, I'm going to put in the Fusion show, and I'm also going to view it, and I'm going to change the font on this. So now what I can do, the cool thing about nodes is you can take one node that has some type of control or some type of variable or it has some type of output, and you can connect it to as many other nodes as you want. So in this case, we have this rectangle, as you can see here, half of it's on, half of it's off. So when I connect this over and we view this, it's going to cut off just half of it, right? So what I can do is I can then take this, drag it down to here, and then do the same here. But what I can do with this text is I can come over into settings and I can apply mask inverted. So it's going to flip the mask that is connected to it. So now if I do that and I view this, it's just going to be the top half. And then here is going to be the bottom half. So let's view them in separate windows like this, right? So we have the top half of the one and the bottom half of the other. If we were to connect both of these together, we would get a merge node that we would need. We could type it in, or we could drag from right here, or get it up in the effects library. But here's a merge. And taking a look at this, we have 3 connectors and 1 output. If we hover over each one, it says what they do, okay? You're going to start to remember these colors and what they represent. The colors are reused on different nodes for different things. So it'll just take a little bit to get used to it, but in a merge, the yellow is going to be the background, green is going to be the foreground. And I guess the best way to explain this, okay, so here is a quick demonstration. I have blue and a orange. So if I take the orange and I go into the yellow as the background and then take the blue and bring it in as the foreground, we can see that the blue is sitting on top. If you ever connect these up, you don't have to sit here and disconnect and then connect this and then connect that, right? You don't have to do that. What you can do is you just click on here, hold down Control and hit T, and it flips these 2 inputs, right? So it's an easy way to do it. So we can see that when this comes in as the foreground, it's being added on top of whatever the background is. The settings that are in the merge, all of these settings are how you're going to apply the foreground, whatever's coming into the foreground, how you're going to apply it to the background. We can do different apply modes, which are similar to what are referred to as blend modes. So we can come in and do these different blend modes, right? So we have that. We can also take this foreground element and we can move its position, right? And we can do that. But yeah, so all of these controls are how we're going to apply the foreground to the background. And then on top of that, this also has a mask. So you can mask how all of these settings and the foreground element are going to be masked when they get applied to the background. So that's how the merges work. So what we're going to do is grab a merge and we're going to connect them up. Okay. And I guess one of the other quick little tips I want to show you is the first thing you connect is going to connect to the background, right? So I can just go to the middle and it'll just connect to the background and then take this and it'll connect to the foreground. Now, what I want to do is I want to animate them coming on because they're kind of just like half and half right now. So I'm going to come into, let's go to frame 30 and I'm going to come to my text and we'll come into layout. And inside layout, I am going to move this down here because it's behind, in that mask, and then bring it up so it's visible. And we're going to turn this into an animation. So I'll come down. I'm going to click this little button here. That's to add a keyframe. keyframe says, at this frame, we're doing this. Because there are no other keyframes before that, it's going to have the position of this keyframe. If something changes after that keyframe, by the time it gets to that keyframe, it has to have that new value, if you didn't know how keyframes work. So next, I'm going to go up 20 frames. So we can see we're at 30, 40, 50, 20 frames. And now I'm going to, in the Y, I'm going to move it up like that. So if we take a look at that now, we have it move up, right? It's very linear. We can add easing and make it look cooler in a little, but that's what we're doing. Next, I'm going to do the same timing, but for the other one to go down. So we're going to come back. If we ever are curious what the keyframes are on the other tool, you just have to click it, and then you can see the little dots for where they are. But we're going to click. So we're at 30, and I'm going to come over to layout, and I want to move this up so we don't see it. And then 10, 20, whoops, 10, 20. And then it's kind of hard because there's a couple different controls here. I'm going to slide this down by clicking over here. So now if we watch this, we have 2 coming out, right? Looks good. Now I need to spice this up a little bit. I think I'm going to have like some type of a line that appears. Yeah, so to do that, I'm just going to grab a background node, right? This is just going to be a solid element, right? Currently it's on solid color. You can switch between gradients and stuff like that. It's on a solid color. I'm going to change this and make it white. And then I'm going to grab a mask because I want this to just be a really little line, right? So grabbing the mask here, these controls you can actually grab in the viewer and you can move them around. I'm going to pull this down a little bit and just go to one view. And we're going to drag this down a little bit. And I'm going to actually switch this to 100% so I can actually see the thickness that this would turn into. And I think I'm going to do that right there. All right, so if I come back to fit, now we have our little line, but I want the line to animate on. So the easiest way that I like to do this, I will take the line that I have, I will copy it, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. Because I already had this node selected, when I copied it and I pasted it right away, it automatically connected this node in line. So now in this second rectangle, I'm going to flip this to multiply. It's just a way to, when they're overlapped, to be able to see each one. I'm going to go into 2 views for this. Have this selected. As we pull it over, we can see that that line is only showing up where this line is, right? And when they're overlapping. So for this effect that we're doing here is I'm going to have the second one over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it all the way over till I can't see it anymore. And if I have this, just this node viewed over here, I'm always going to be able to see it because we're just viewing that node. We're not viewing the one that works down, right? So what I like about that is then I can take this and I can drag it right over to where it is. If it's bouncing back and forth and it's hard to get it correctly, you can hold down Control and it'll allow you to have like finer adjustments. So I'll go to there and we will go back to, where does this start? This starts at 30. So we'll come back to, let's go to 10. 10's good. On the rectangle 2, we will keyframe its position. And by the time we get to 30, we're going to just click in here and go to 0.5 because that's going to go back to where it was. So now if we view this line, what we'll see is over that period of time, now we have a line appear. So now that we have a line appear, I want to add one more element to this, like a little ball that appears and then the ball moves and it leaves behind that line. So to do that, along this set of masks, I'm going to click to grab an ellipse. And in the ellipse, to keep it as a perfect circle, the easiest way, instead of having to, click here or to click here and get it, correct, you can click in the corner to get it to move like this. But once you get it so small, it's difficult to do that. So what I like to do is just right click in here, expression, and then just drag down to height. And then now these are working together and I only have to move one slider and keyframe one slider. So I'll bring this down to about that big and we'll bring it all the way over. And I'm going to zoom in and have 2 views. And this is just showing the end of this first one, because this is the one that I'm viewing, and I'm going to take this ellipse and move it over so we're right on the edge there. So right there. Okay. Now I'm going to click on our rectangle, come back to frame 10, and on the ellipse, I'm going to keyframe the position, come back to, let's go frame 1 and make it small. So it will get big and then it'll draw the line. Okay. So now we have to do the move. So let's have it follow the rectangle. So I'm going to come up to 30, and then at 30, we're going to click on the ellipse again, and we're going to move the ellipse to the other side. So to zoom in and out, I'm going to hold down Control and then use my mouse wheel to go in and out, to zoom in and out, but my mouse is kind of messed up. So now we'll move it to the other side. I'm going to zoom in over here so I can get it right on there. So there we are. Now it goes to the other side. So now if we view this at the beginning, it comes on and it writes all the way across. So now that when it writes all the way across, from here, I'm going to now keyframe, come up a couple of frames, and then have it get small. So right on, across, and then get small. Right on, across, get small. Okay, perfect. So now that it's doing that, everything should be timed up accordingly. I'm going to come over. I'm going to put all of this stuff on top of, or I'm going to put my line on top of all of this stuff. So my line's always on top. If you're using different colors, you're going to want to do that. All right, so now if I view this, line goes across, then we have the titles come out. I actually think I want this title to be a little smaller. So I'm going to make the font a little smaller. And I'm actually going to come back to the previous keyframe, which is right here. We can see that it's on, and we move back. And I'm going to move this up just a little bit, and then come into the other one and move that down a little bit too. So there we are. So now if we look at it, it goes across and it looks good. All right. So next, obviously, we have a transparent background. So I want to add a background. So let's create a background quick. Almost done with this. Holding down middle mouse button to move around within the node window. So we're going to grab a background. Actually, you know what? We're going to grab 3 different backgrounds. And I'm going to grab an ellipse tool and connect up an ellipse tool. So the first one will be black. The second one, let's just go one view and fit. This one, I'm going to make this purple. And then I'm going to take my ellipse, make it long, rotate it, bring it up into this corner. And then I will take this to like 0.8. So we have a nice fading off. I'm going to copy this, Control C, click here, Control V, copy it over. Now in here, I'm going to make this one blue and move it to the other corner, down like that. Now I'm going to take these 2 colors and lay it on top of the black. So have it go up, have this one go up. Now, if we view that, there is our background for this project. We can take all of this stuff, move it over, and we're going to lay all of our text on top of this background. So there we are. So now if we view this, line that goes across shows our text, looks good, but we have no animation off yet. So we can add in a quick animation off. So to do that, coming over towards the end of our project here, clicking on text, just going to keyframe, and let's come in a couple, and we will drop this down so it's behind. And the same thing here, 110 keyframe. Where was I at for this? 130. All right, come back over to here, 130, and then have that slide up. Now we need to get rid of the line. So the easiest way to get rid of this line is, because both of these have to multiply, is we could really just come into this end one here, click merge, or click with, excuse me. And actually, you know what? I think I want to have it happen before. So like as this is almost going away. So like I would say like right about there. I'm going to keyframe the width. And then by the time it gets to somewhere in here, it's going to go into 0. So now if we view it, goes across, they show up, there it is, go back in, and it goes away. All right, so there we go. That is pretty much all of our project. So then the next thing to get this to go onto the edit page, because if we go over to the edit page right now, we obviously wouldn't see it. Let's just move this. We wouldn't see it here. And to get it to go to the edit page, you have to have whatever your final, wherever the final element is to your project, you have to have that output go to a, no, that's not right, a media out node. They're typically there somewhere. I don't know why that one wasn't there, but a media out node has to go into a media out node. And then once it's in a media out node, we'll then see it here, right? So, but I want to come back to our keyframes and we can add in some easing. So I'm going to just highlight both of the texts here and open up our spline tool. And we can see both of them here. Typically, you're probably going to see this, which will show all of your keyframes. If you click this little button, then you can see all of your keyframes. I don't like looking at it like this because it's once you start to build complex things, there's too much stuff going on there. So what I like to do is click this little button, show only selected. So whatever you have highlighted, that's over here, whatever's highlighted, then you'll see it over here. And we'll click like that. And having them both clicked with check marks enables us to edit them. If it's ones like this, it's just to view like its position, right? So we want to have them check marks. If you want to, you can change the color of the line, but it's not really necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these, which are the going into it coming up, and hit F, which is going to add in easing, and you can hit T to enable what that easing amount is. You can also grab the handles here and do it, but I like to do it this way. So now when it goes up, they go up and then they like slowly, like they settle really nicely. I'm also in this one, it's movement that comes over. I'm going to do the same thing, but we need to do it to both of these. So what I'm actually going to do is drop this down just so we can, all right. So I'm going to grab both of these and I'm going to select here. I'm going to get rid of the height because we don't really need to see that right now. Go like that. Because they're both the identical move, you can't really see them. They're both there, but you can't really see them. Once you click this button, if they're like this, when you click this button, then they're both on top of each other. So I'm just going to select F, add in some easing. So it went to the end and then it slowed down once it got to the end a little bit. Just some little things. If our text was moving a bit faster, you could add in motion blur if you wanted to. So the node that's doing the move is the node that has to calculate the motion blur. So you couldn't just come down to the bottom here and come over to settings and enable motion blur. It doesn't work like that. You have to, on the nodes that do the motion, you have to enable the motion blur. So the text is the one that has the move. If I come into settings and I apply motion blur, we can now see it here. If we look at it closely, we can see it's sort of steppy, but because it's not moving that fast, it doesn't look that bad. The more you increase the quality, it starts to smooth it out. But the more you increase the quality, the longer it takes for them to render. So I'm just going to do it the lowest setting just for this because this doesn't have that much movement, but I want a little bit of motion blur because I feel like it really adds, as you can see there, it adds a little bit. It makes things look smoother once they're not doing 20 frames. Down here, it shows you the current speed of what you're watching, and this will go down if it's calculating things. And then once it's all cached, then things are a lot easier to view. Over here, it shows the percentage of your memory that's being used by Fusion, and this is the total amount that's currently being used, right? If you want to add more of your memory to Fusion, you can come up here to DaVinci Resolve, preferences, and then click on memory and GPU, and then you can increase the amount here, right? So that's down here. If you ever want to clear your cache, you can simply, and this is just the memory cache. There's a couple different caches in Resolve, but the memory cache for Fusion We're going to right click down here, and then you can purge cache down here by doing that, right? So there is our effect. It animates on, it animates off. It looks pretty good. You can obviously start to add a lot more to this. Trying to keep it basic, giving you an idea of how these nodes work together and how you can reuse things, like we reused this here, then brought it down and then went to the media out. Now it's on our edit page, and we can use it just like any element, right? So I can bring some media in here. If I drag this up and drag a couple of pieces of media in here, and we'll cut it. Maybe I want to bring this over like this. So we're watching our media, and then, our little title thing pops up. And then once that goes away, then it goes to the next clip. So this just acts like a normal clip. We can see the little stars here that indicates that it's a Fusion comp. If you ever add any compositing work onto any of these, they're also going to say that. When they say that, that means that it has to go through an extra step of going through Fusion. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Once we have the render cache, which is across the top, it doesn't use Fusion at that point. It reads a video file that it made in the background. So playback will be very fast. So that's pretty much my beginner guide to Fusion. It's not that difficult. Obviously, there's a couple of things to learn. There is a bit of a learning curve, learning each node, what it does. You don't need to know every node. You only need to know the nodes that you need to know. That was a terrible way of explaining that. When you watch tutorials, if they kind of skimp over something, hopefully this added that extra bit of knowledge so that you didn't, get completely confused when they skimmed over something of that nature. Yeah, the possibilities in Fusion are really endless, to be honest with you. If you look at the backlog on my channel, almost everything on there is all done with the default stuff within Fusion and the free version of Fusion. I try to stay away from the stuff that the studio version, like the studio only version has, just because I want everyone to be able to create things and just show the possibilities with a free piece of software. But yeah, that's kind of it. Hopefully you've learned something from this. But yeah, that's where I'm going to leave this one. With that being said, my name's JR. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and have a good one.